which iPad should you buy? There are 6 models to choose from. Then you've got like 3 keyboards, 3 pencils, you've got 5G, nano texture, different storage capacities. It can all get very overwhelming and also really bloody expensive. So in this video, I'm going to guide you through the pros and cons of each iPad, compare them, and hopefully by the end you have a better idea of which one makes sense for you, and whether it's actually worth spending an awful lot of money on a new iPad Pro with the M5. This is the just refreshed top spec flagship 13-inch. I've got the 11-inch as well with that new M5 chip, so we're going to talk about what kind of an improvement that is. I'll leave links to all of these iPads in the description below. If you enjoy the video, find it helpful, then a cheeky like and subscribe would be fantastic. And also a big thank you to Paperlike for partly sponsoring this video. But before we dive into each of these, there's 7 things you need to consider before you buy one. Number 1, and this is really important because essentially all iPads will run all the same apps and games. There's a handful that will only run on some of the higher models, but they are all fantastic tablets. They've all been pretty recently refreshed, although a couple are more in need of an update than others. You can't go wrong, essentially. All new iPads claim 10 hours of battery life, which is pretty bang on actually, although of course depends on how you use it. They have cameras front and back. They all support Apple Pencils, plus they all have USB-C ports for charging or connecting accessories. As we go up the line, the higher-end iPads, from the Mini to the Airs to the Pros, get progressively faster, the screens get better, we get more storage, plus better cameras, better connectivity. Number 2, how are you actually going to use your iPad? I know it's a bit of a vague, annoying question, but it's actually really important to make sure you don't overspend. Number 3, and you don't need to buy a new iPad. You could also check out used or refurbished models. You could save a lot of money by going with a last-gen iPad like this Air M2 or maybe a Pro from a couple of years ago. Just make sure you're getting decent warranty from the retailer. Number 4, options and accessories. This is where the prices really start to stack up. I think in terms of priority, storage, number 1, because you can't upgrade this, you can't add it on down the line. Then I would think about a keyboard because it does transform your iPad into more of a laptop replacement, and I absolutely love these Magic keyboards. Then I would say consider a pencil, particularly if you are a keen doodler or drawer or note taker. Yes, you can just use your finger, but these are more precise. Then maybe consider 5G option, mobile connectivity. Personally, I wouldn't bother. I just hotspot from my phone or I'm on a Wi-Fi somewhere. You know, if your company's paying for it and you've got unlimited money, sure, why not? You can also engrave your iPad, which I've always said, why would you do that? It completely destroys the resale value, although Apple do say it doesn't impact the trade-in value of your iPad, which is most likely what you do with it when you come to upgrade. So actually, maybe. And also finally, on the Pro models, if you spec the 1 or 2 terabyte, you have a nano texture option, which gives you this lovely kind of mattified screen. And there's also a ton of third-party accessories, which are often cheaper than the official Apple stuff. Number 5, and a lot of people want to turn their iPads into like a laptop replacement. Rather than buying a new MacBook and an iPad, maybe an iPad with a keyboard can do the same job? Well, you probably can get away with it 90% of the time. Sometimes I do just miss a proper desktop like on the Mac and also proper desktop applications. These, of course, running iPad OS 26 are all running mobile apps or, iPad optimized apps, not proper Mac OS applications. But with the latest software and the improvements to multitasking and paired with a keyboard, you can get pretty close to being a laptop replacement. Although, to be honest, even going for like an iPad Air and adding a keyboard, you're basically in the same price territory as a MacBook Air anyway. Number 6, and unfortunately, Apple has not sponsored this video. There's no big fat check from Tim Cook on my desk. So please consider rivals, alternatives. You've got Galaxy Tabs, you've got Honor Magic Pads, OnePlus Pads, you've got the really cheap Kindles. And if you want a proper Windows desktop experience, then maybe a Microsoft Surface Pro. For my money, though, I do still think these are the best tablets, especially if you're already in the Apple ecosystem with an iPhone or a MacBook. And lastly, number 7, just a quick word on Apple Intelligence. This is supported on all new iPads except the standard base model. This does not have the hardware to support it. It's not the end of the world. Apple Intelligence is basically like the slightly improved Siri. You have the writing assistant tools, AI image generation. Nice little extras, but not something I think most of us use every day. It could be more useful in the future as Apple continue to develop it and give you new features. So it's worth bearing in mind that they all support it except the cheapest one. But don't forget, you can just download Gemini or ChatGPT and use cloud-based AI on your cheapest iPad anyway. Right, let's talk about the lineup. Which iPad should you buy? Well, there are 4 models to choose from. You've got the iPad, that's what it's called, just the iPad. Then the iPad Mini, then the iPad Air 11 and 13, and the iPad Pro 11 and 13. And these have just been refreshed end of 2025 with the M5 chip, starting with the cheapest, literally just called the iPad, but technically it's the 11th gen iPad with A16, and this is by far the cheapest iPad, and I think is actually fantastic value. Performance, RAM, camera performance is all significantly better than the previous gen iPad, and for the same price. This will cost you $349 in the US or £329 here in the UK, although I've seen it for as low as $300. It's definitely worth having a shop around. Plus there's a new 512 gig storage option for this, although I probably wouldn't spend that much money on the base iPad. The 11-inch 60Hz 500 nit True Tone Liquid Retina display is the same as before, and it's fine, but it's not as bright or color accurate as the rest of the range, and it's also not laminated, so you have this little air gap between the glass and the screen. And also there's no anti-reflective coating, which the rest of the lineup benefit from. You're also getting USB-C for charging and accessories, you have pretty decent stereo speakers, we have a Touch ID fingerprint reader in the power button, and also a very nice 12 megapixel camera with center stage along the side here. And you're getting the same roughly 10 hours of battery life. Yes, it's the cheapest base model, but it's great for all the usual iPad-y things, watching movies, playing games, reading, browsing, and it's plenty fast enough for 99% of the apps and games out there. And they're fantastic for kids with all the learning apps, and you have a ton of parental controls to limit watch times and what they can buy or download. Same probably goes for older folks as well. And I think the bump to 128 gigs of storage is actually the iPad A16's biggest upgrade, and it means it's easy to recommend the cheapest base model. If you're buying the cheapest iPad, keep it cheap. The thing is, the base iPad A16 is the only one that doesn't get Apple Intelligence or also the Stage Manager feature for better multitasking with these guys. Is that a big deal? Probably not, in my opinion. More of an issue, perhaps, is that the iPad A16 isn't compatible with more demanding games like Assassin's Creed Mirage and Shadows and Death Stranding. On the flip side, though, it does support Apple's own Final Cut Pro if you're into your fancier video editing. The bottom line, though, is bumping up to the Mini or the Air will get you better compatibility, especially with gaming and especially longer term. But if you just want an iPad and don't really care about all the bells and whistles and spending a fortune just so you can play games a bit better or edit videos quicker, then get the iPad. Just the base model, I wouldn't pay for more storage. 128 gigs is fine. And you've also got iCloud backups. You can use an external SSD, to back up. This is the epitome of cheap and cheerful, and I love it. What you can do, though, if you fancy throwing Apple a bit more of your money, is add the Magic Keyboard Folio. This acts as a case, and you get this keyboard which attaches magnetically and has this very handy little kickstand. So if you want a more laptop-y kind of experience that's a lot cheaper than the rest of the iPad lineup, then give this a go. Although bear in mind the Folio keyboard is nearly the price of the iPad itself. You've also got two options for the Apple Pencil, either the first-gen Pencil, which works well but charges via an awkward lightning adapter, or the one I would get, the newer, cheaper Apple Pencil USB-C, which does lose pressure sensitivity but attaches to the side magnetically so it's easy to carry around with you, although you still have to charge it via the USB-C port. Hang on though, what if we could get an iPad Pro nano texture kind of aesthetic on any iPad without spending a fortune? That's where Paperlike comes in, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. So whenever I get a new iPad, I always pop one of these on, a Paperlike screen protector. It protects your screen, it helps you write and draw more precisely, and I just love the more natural feel of paper under your hand and under the pencil. What's so special about this? Well, it's all down to something called nanodots microbead technology, basically tiny little beads that create just the right texture and resistance, so your finger or your Apple Pencil feels like it's gliding over a real sheet of paper. It also gets rid of that annoying feeling where your wrist sticks to the glass. It's like a proper sketch pad, and it gives your screen this lovely matte finish, reducing harsh glare and distracting reflections. It also means fewer smudges and fingerprints, and it protects the screen, which the expensive nano texture option on the Pro models doesn't do. And the whole thing is slightly thicker than a human hair, so you're getting that extra layer of protection without any bulk. And hey, it's not just for fancy digital artists. If you're using your iPad for note-taking, journaling, planning, honestly, even finger taps feel nicer on this thing. Paperlike backs it up with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee, so if you don't like it, or even if you mess up the application process, they'll sort you out with a free replacement or a refund, no worries. So whichever iPad you own, definitely check out Paperlike, and I'll leave a link in the description below. Then we have the iPad Mini. This is the 7th generation Mini, and it is the cutest. I love this thing, and it is literally the most pocketable iPad. If I just pop that in there, I'm not sure how comfortable that is, but you can't do that with any other iPad. I can make this bit really quick and say, if you want the small iPad, then get this one, because otherwise I think it's actually a little bit harder to recommend in terms of features and price. But a lot of people, a lot of businesses and industries swear by it just because of the size. It is cute though, and it's by far the easiest for reading one-handed, it's perfect for taking notes, and it also might be my favorite for gaming, as it's lighter and being smaller, it's easy to reach the controls. Versus the base iPad, we have the faster A17 Pro chip, which does therefore mean it supports Apple Intelligence. We also have a brighter screen with more accurate colors. It is laminated, so it doesn't have that air gap. It does also have an anti-reflective coating, like they all do, except the base iPad. What a difference that makes. That is a reason to pay a little bit more for this over this. And also, fun fact, the Mini has the highest DPI, meaning it's the sharpest looking display of any iPad. Base storage is 128 gigs, which is plenty for most of us. The USB-C port is faster if you're transferring files from a storage drive, for example. And it supports both the Apple Pencil USB-C and the best Pencil Pro. Downsides? Well, it is quite pricey. £499 for an 8-inch 60Hz tablet with an A17 Pro, doesn't even have an M series chip, and it's just shy of £1,000 if you spec it with 512 gigs of storage and 5G connectivity. Definitely don't do that. The A17 Pro is still plenty fast enough for games and apps, and it's the same chip used in the iPhone 15 Pro series, but overall, the Mini feels like a generation behind, say, the Air M3, and not for a lot less cash. If you really want a small tablet, then yeah, this is the one to get, and I wouldn't really bother paying extra for more storage. But then we have the iPad Air, which, if I'm honest, hasn't really properly been refreshed for a couple of generations. This did get updated earlier in 2025, as I awkwardly hold them up, but only basically switching out the M2 chip for the M3, so it was a little bit faster. And since these are essentially the mid-tier iPads, a lot of people go for these because they think, well, it's better than those are too expensive. But does it actually make sense? Are these any good? And is it worth paying an extra £270-ish over the standard iPad? Like the Mini, we're getting that brighter 500 nit, more color accurate and laminated display with that handy anti-reflective coating, plus the much more powerful M3 chip with Apple Intelligence, extra RAM, we've got 8 gigs of the stuff, a faster USB-C port, faster Wi-Fi 6E, although bear in mind you'll need a 6E router to take advantage of that, plus a slightly slimmer chassis. We have support for the Pencil Pro, slightly better image quality for the cameras thanks to the newer chip, and maybe best of all, having that huge 13-inch option, which gives you 30% extra screen space. And also, this Magic Keyboard for the iPad Air has been upgraded with faster USB-C through charging. We have a larger touchpad, this 14-key function row at the top here. This is a very nice setup and close to being a proper laptop replacement. And it supports the Apple Pencil Pro, which is the one you want if you're serious about drawing. The M3 is an incredibly powerful chip and also adds some fancy graphics features like hardware-accelerated ray tracing and mesh shading. You don't need to worry about all that stuff, but it's also much more capable of running demanding apps like Final Cut Pro and Lightroom and 3D apps like Uniform. And of course, this bigger 13-inch Air is way more immersive for watching movies, playing games, and the extra space is great for having 2 apps side by side. 13-inch iPad Air with a pencil, with a keyboard, maybe bumping up the storage to 256, we're into proper laptop money territory then. Although if it makes you feel any better, the 13-inch iPad Air is £500 cheaper than the 13-inch Pro. So kind of like if you want a small iPad, get the Mini. If you want a big iPad and you're not having it paid for by the company or you have really deep pockets, then get the Air 13. This is so much more expensive. But as I say, even the smaller 11-inch is the best part of £300 more than the base iPad, and we're still not getting Face ID, we're stuck at 60 Hz, which just makes it feel less responsive and doesn't feel like you have an M3 chip under the hood, and we're still stuck with an IPS LCD screen. Given what we saw with the iPhone 17, finally getting that 120Hz ProMotion, I would be surprised if in the first half of 2026 we didn't see the Airs and maybe the Mini also updated to ProMotion. I don't know for sure, but I would be surprised if we didn't. So maybe wait, or maybe consider the previous generation M2 Air, which is essentially the same thing, just with a 1 generation older processor, which really doesn't make that much difference. The base 128GB model is the best value, but 256 for an extra £100 is a pretty good option for making it more future-proof. Before we talk about the pros, just a quick sidebar, and let's talk about some of the accessories. And for the Apple Pencil, you have 2 main options. You've got the Apple Pencil USB-C and the fully featured Apple Pencil Pro. All new iPads work with the Apple Pencil USB-C, which attaches magnetically but does lack that wireless charging, and also you don't have pressure sensitivity. However, these guys, all of them basically except for this one, do support the new Pencil Pro, which is the most feature-rich and just best all-round pencil that you can get. It adds wireless charging, you get pressure sensitivity, haptic feedback, you've got squeeze and barrel roll controls, plus there's Find My in case you drop it down the back of the sofa, which you probably will. There are older first and second gen pencils which are compatible with older iPads, and in the case of the first gen pencil, still works with the base iPad A16, but for simplicity, for convenience, I would just stick with the newer USB-C pencil instead. And if you're buying an Air or a Pro, I would get the Apple Pencil Pro. They are equally well supported on both. However, because we do have the higher refresh rate, the ProMotion on the iPad Pros, the responsiveness of the pencil is a little bit better. So for really keen artists and professionals, then that is one more reason to get a Pro. As for keyboards, Apple actually has a dedicated option for each of these, except for the Mini, which I think is just too small, but you can use a third-party Bluetooth keyboard. You've got the Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pro, the Magic Keyboard for the iPad Air, which is a little bit different, the Pro one's a little bit more premium, and also the Magic Keyboard Folio for the base iPad. All have great keyboards and touchpads, although only the Magic keyboards for the Air and the Pro have a more premium glass trackpad and also USB-C port on the side here for charging, which obviously frees up the other USB-C port on the iPad if you want to plug in an SD card or a USB drive. And the Magic Keyboard you get with the Airs and the Pros is a fair bit nicer than the Folio you get with the standard one, and you can see here the Pro models get this aluminium chassis. The Pro version also adds haptic feedback to the keys, they're also backlit, and comes in black or white, so it definitely feels the most premium. Both lovely keyboards to use, and as I say, pretty much essential if you want to turn these into a bit of a laptop replacement. The downside is that they are all very expensive, so maybe go for an iPad first and then see if you want a keyboard down the line and spread out the costs a little bit. We're nearly there, I promise, because last but by no means least, we have the new iPad Pros. These are the ones that have been the most recently updated, and of course I've got the 11 here and the 13, and you can also see, if I put them awkwardly side by side, the 13-inch has the nano texture option. It's an extra 100 quid or so, I think it is, and only available if you spec it with 1 or 2 terabytes of storage, so it's extremely expensive to have this option. But if you regularly use your iPad outside and bright sunshine, studio lights for whatever reason, or if you use the Apple Pencil, because actually this has a much smoother, more paper-like feel to it, then it might be worth considering. Anyway, the key upgrade with these new Pro M5s is the M5 chip. It essentially is just a spec bump refresh. And to show you just how powerful this bad boy is, here's a quick look how the processor and the graphics compare to the rest of the iPad lineup. The iPad Air with the M3 is very fast, but the Pro M5 is just in another league. And versus the last gen Pro M4, this new M5 is around 30 to 35% faster for graphics, over 3 times faster for AI performance, we get faster memory bandwidth, we get a bump in RAM from 8 to 12 gigabytes even on the base models, and they've doubled the storage speeds. And we get Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 6 as these Pros use Apple's new in-house modem. And in every way, these iPad Pros are just gorgeous. The chassis, I mean, this 13-inch is just 5.1 millimeters thick. The 11's like 5.3. They are so incredibly thin, it's ridiculous. We also get the 120Hz ProMotion OLED display. It's a huge step up from the Air, with deeper blacks, better contrast, color accuracy, much higher brightness, and also you have the optional Now texture coating. The rear cameras are higher quality. You get an ultra-wide and a LiDAR sensor. A faster USB 4 port, which supports Thunderbolt 4 for faster transfers and can output up to a 6K display. The quad speakers and also the quad studio mics sound incredible. They're the only iPads to get Face ID, and you're getting more RAM, 12 gigs of the stuff on the base models, and 16 if you spec it with 1 or 2 terabytes of storage. As you'd expect though, they are not cheap. The 11-inch iPad Pro starts at £1,000, £999. And if you want a fully spec'd out top-end 2 terabyte nano texture 13-inch with a keyboard and a pencil, it's over £3,000. Like, you could buy a MacBook Air for the same price as this by itself. So the Pros are genuinely a pro-level device in terms of performance, but also price. So I think unless you're buying this on the business, or you seriously need this level of performance, or just can't live with a 60Hz screen, the Pros are a little bit hard to justify. Okay, enough waffling. Which one should you actually buy? Well, I think for most of us, the base iPad, just the cheapest one, is the best option. It does everything you need. The Mini is a pretty open and shut case. Do you want a small iPad? If so, then yes. If not, then there are better options. And I think it's just a little bit too expensive for what it is. If it's in your budget and you use your iPad a lot, then I think the 11 or even the 13-inch Air is worth considering. They are quite a lot of money, but you have the options afterwards for the best Apple Pencil, for a really good Magic Keyboard. You can improve it over time. And with that M3 chip, this is going to be future-proof for the next 5-10 years. You'll be absolutely fine. I really would like to see these updated with the 120Hz ProMotion, but for now, I think, as you'd expect, really, the Airs, being in the middle of the group, are probably the best all-rounders. Mainly because the Pros are just so freaking expensive, and unless you really have a need for it, unless you've got the company credit card, as nice as these are, with the M5, with that design, with these 120Hz OLED screens, they're just too expensive to easily recommend, which is where I think it's worth considering previous, older versions of the iPads, the M2 Air, the M4 Pros, or even a generation older than that. If you can get a good deal on an older version, then I think that could actually be the best way forward. Which one would I buy? Well, I'm a tech creator and a bit of a nerd, and this is my full-time job, testing and using these sort of things. I would probably buy the 11-inch iPad Pro. Also, if you have an iPad already, check out Apple's trade-in scheme, because even if it's engraved, they'll actually give you some decent money for iPads, depending on how old it is. And also, if you're a student or a teacher or think in the military, depending on where you live, you might be able to get discounts as well. And check Amazon or other retailers, because often you'll find these for like 50 quid off. So hopefully you found that helpful. If you've got any questions or have any other tips for iPads that you want to share with everyone else, drop a comment below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I know that was a long video, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.